When I was rushed into surgery, my family and boyfriend were there. Only they weren't by my side. They were supporting my foster sister Sophie as she competed in her dance event that day. No one thought to check on me until much later. The operation itself was successful. The tumor in my brain was removed, but something went wrong along the way. The nerves responsible for sensation were badly damaged, and I woke up in a world where I could no longer feel things the way others do. Emotionally or physically, it was like a switch had been flipped. I wanted so badly to tell my parents and Ethan what had happened. But my parents were too busy buying plane tickets to support Sophie's dancing ambitions abroad. And Ethan? He was always working late, too caught up in his own life to notice anything else. I remember sitting with my phone in hand, staring at a half-typed message for hours, trying to find the words. Eventually I just deleted it. Something inside me knew that even if I did reach out, no one would really care. In their eyes, I didn't matter the way Sophie did. Sophie came into our lives when I was 10. She was 6 then, an orphan after her parents died in a car accident. Her relatives abandoned her, and she ended up on the streets, dirty, cold and alone, until my father found her during a visit to an old friend. He brought her home, and from that day on, she became our second daughter. My parents told me I needed to grow up and learn how to take care of my little sister. But all I learned was how to disappear. Sophie was always fragile, always needing more. And I was just there. When I was 10, I lost my bedroom and moved into the guest room. By 12, my piano lessons were cancelled, and the piano was sold to make space for her dance studio. At 15, I stopped getting new clothes altogether, wearing only 2 sets of school uniforms on rotation. My parents never noticed. They dressed Sophie beautifully, parading her around proudly, calling her their pretty daughter to anyone who would listen. So I stayed away from home as much as I could. Then, when I was about to graduate from college, Sophie left to study abroad. For a short while, my parents remembered I existed. They called more often, asked about my life, even sent me job listings in my city. My father saw sending Sophie to university as some kind of moral achievement, and he was thrilled enough to suggest visiting me and meeting Ethan, my 3-year boyfriend. I didn't expect much from them anymore, but still I made arrangements for a hotel for dinner. I didn't know Sophie would be with them that night. She smiled the same innocent smile she had the first time we met. She smiled at Ethan all evening, and I should have known then what was coming. Before surgery, I tried calling my parents one last time. The call barely lasted 3 seconds before I heard their worried voices. "We're boarding now. Sophie's competition is important. We'll talk when we get back. If there's anything." That was all. The line cut off before I could say anything. Later that night, I saw Alex post a photo of his plane ticket. Destination: the same country where Megan, Sophie's best friend, was competing in a sports event. His caption read something about chasing dreams. I stared at the screen until my aunt gently took my phone away. She said she'd signed the consent form for my surgery, that I didn't have to worry, that she'd handle everything. She told me I'd endured enough, that I deserved peace. Then she patted my head and whispered, "Sarah, I'll be here waiting for you." As anesthesia started to pull me under, I wondered if I'd wake up at all. If I didn't, would they mourn me? Would Alex finally care again? Our story wasn't dramatic at first. It was almost sweet. He was the student council president, handsome, well-off, and I was the girl he helped after fainting from exhaustion at a campus welcome party. The next time we met, he slipped 2 candies into my pocket. From then on, he always carried candy for me in his coat. To him, I was someone easily won over by small gestures. He used to look at me with concern and say, "Sarah, I've never been this scared of losing someone before." He claimed I meant more to him than anyone else, that there was always a special place for me beside him, like the candy tucked safely in his coat pocket. But one night, after staying up late for meetings, I reached into his coat and found something that didn't belong to me. A lipstick, Chanel, silver tube, shade 116. Megan's favorite. I put it back without a word. From that day on, I stopped expecting treats from him. And I stopped expecting love too. After that, I tried to become self-reliant. Lowered my expectations, avoided disappointment. But I'm human. I couldn't stay detached forever. Alex spent a year chasing me, then another 3 years caring for me. At least that's what I thought. Over 4 years, he slowly pulled away, making me think I had someone to rely on, only for the cliché to repeat itself. Just when I believed I'd found real love, he changed his mind. Turned out he fell for my sister first. Pity for her tragic past grew into admiration for her bright, energetic personality. As he listened to Megan talk about sports, watched her excel on the field, he realized he felt something real for her. Something fiery. Something he said he'd never felt with me. After a few drinks, he admitted that what he felt for me was more habit than love. Then he pursued Megan full force. We broke up naturally. I decided not to fight it. I'd spent my whole life stepping aside anyway. But something shifted when I woke up from surgery. I realized it shouldn't be me fading into the background anymore. The first person to notice the change was my aunt. She sat by my bed peeling apples and telling funny stories, trying to cheer me up. But she saw through my silence. I didn't ask for comfort like I used to, though she could always read my longing in my eyes. Longing for my parents' attention, for the love that was mine by right. That longing was gone now. When I was released from the hospital, the doctors asked if I felt anything unusual. I told them calmly, I've never felt better. All the emotional noise that once clouded my thoughts had vanished. I could finally see things clearly. My parents didn't care about me, so maybe they wouldn't leave me their inheritance. Or worse, maybe they'd burden me with responsibilities instead. The company Alex and I co-founded. I handled every part of it. One person was enough. I didn't need their validation anymore. I only cared about what was rightfully mine. When I got home, my aunt and I ran into my parents, Megan and Alex, returning from their trip. They were laughing and celebrating, completely ignoring why I hadn't called that day. When they saw me standing pale-faced in the living room, they hesitated for a moment. Then Megan stepped forward, linking her arm with mine, asking if I minded them celebrating her award with Alex at our house. In the past, I might have nodded silently, played the role of the obedient girl. But now, under their scrutinizing gaze, I gently pushed Megan's hand away. She burst into tears instantly. My father jumped in to scold me. Alex opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but he didn't lie. Eyes met. My mother stayed silent, letting them berate me without stepping in. Only when my aunt came downstairs, suitcase in hand, ready to take me away, did my father and Alex stop talking. As we walked out, my mother asked where we were going. I told her that from now on, only my aunt was my family. My father nearly exploded with anger, but my aunt just took me and left. My mother chased after us, questioning everything, trying to guilt-trip me. But none of it worked anymore. I finally told her about my surgery, and who actually signed the consent form. My mother's face turned pale. "Why didn't you tell us about something so serious?" she muttered. My aunt smiled and reminded her that half a month ago, she had called multiple times. My mother looked surprised, then frantically checked her phone. "It's useless," my aunt said. "Even if you find the records, you didn't answer her calls. You were too busy flying with your adopted daughter." That night, my mother tried to contact me, but she found all her accounts blocked. So did my father, Ethan, and Alex. They couldn't reach me. And they couldn't bring themselves to confront my aunt and uncle either. They talked about me in the family group chat, calling me petty and ungrateful. They accused me of being jealous of Sophie's success, of not telling the family when I was sick, of making a scene in front of my aunt. At first, my aunt found their complaints amusing. She told me to ignore the messages. Then she shared my medical records and photos of her taking care of me in the hospital. She asked them how they could live with themselves, how their own daughter could be hospitalized, surgeries delayed because of them, yet they showed no concern. Even now, they were belittling their recovering daughter. Their lies were exposed, and they grew angry. They sent voice messages arguing with my aunt, but she ignored them and eventually left the group chat. That night, she held me as I slept, gently patting my shoulder. "Your brother and his family are wrong," she whispered. "You did nothing wrong. If you feel sad, let it out. Don't keep it bottled up." I looked at her calmly. "I'm not sad," I said. Not even a flicker of emotion stirred in me. By the time I saw my parents again, I didn't care whether they cared about me or not. I was focused on cutting ties before they dragged me down any further. Under the moonlight, my aunt looked surprised. Those warm, compassionate eyes widened, then filled with pain. She must have realized something I already knew. I could understand emotions in others perfectly, but I couldn't feel them myself. Maybe it was a side effect of the surgery. But honestly, I didn't mind. If anything, I preferred it. I was more objective now, more rational. I still knew right from wrong. I just didn't carry the weight of feeling anymore. I knew my aunt genuinely cared for me. Even if I couldn't feel gratitude, I understood it. And I resolved to honor her in the days ahead. As for my parents, they probably noticed the change in me. But they still hoped I'd come crawling back, still hoping to control me. They didn't realize it was no longer possible. Another 2 weeks passed. My parents continued flaunting their life in social circles, spreading news about how well they treated Megan, making sure I heard about it through others. They wanted me to regret walking away. They wanted me to understand that if I had been smart like Megan, if I had known how to submit, how to please them, they would have treated me well too. Even though I had met their expectations for over 20 years. Finally, my indifference scared them. One day, I ran into my parents and Megan's family at the company entrance, with Alex, who had been missing for 2 weeks. When he saw me, he instinctively wanted to greet me, but he stopped himself. Megan stood beside him, her expression sour, eyes red like she'd been crying. But when she saw me, they lit up instantly. I wasn't interested in whatever act they were putting on. Just as I was about to walk past them, my mother grabbed my wrist. "Sarah," she said, "because of your guilt and self-blame, Megan is suffering from severe depression. The doctor says she needs a partner. We've already talked to Alex. You'll support your sister, right?" She paused, then added sharply, "Megan has gained national recognition in sports over the years. There's a lot invested in her career. As her sister, you can't just watch it collapse, can you?" Her tone gave me a headache. I quietly pulled my hand away and looked at the 4 of them, each with their own agenda, each with their own demands. They had stripped away the last bit of family pretense. I saw through their hidden motives. Even if Alex wanted to be with Megan, there were respectful ways to negotiate. They didn't need to stage a confrontation at my company's entrance just to pressure me. No, this was a test. They wanted to see if I would still obey them, if I would still sacrifice everything to please them. I stood there for a moment thinking. Then I turned and walked away. They didn't follow. After everything that had happened, I gave them my answer. Not with words, but with action. Before they could even begin to feel relieved, I turned to Alex and said something that changed everything. After 6 years of college and building this company together, I told him, "I want 15% of the original shares as compensation." He looked stunned at first, his expression darkening. He was about to speak, but I didn't give him the chance. "If the compensation is fair," I continued, "I won't mention you and Megan again. Even if you two marry in the future, you don't need to invite me. I won't return home. As long as you don't interfere with my life, I'll disappear from yours completely. You don't want your sports star labeled as a mistress, do you?" I added, watching their reactions carefully. As soon as I finished speaking, Megan reacted immediately. She didn't let Alex think it through. She just held his arm and started crying. Alex, who used to pride himself on honesty and not caring about money, surprisingly agreed to the arrangement. The company had been co-founded by both of us. At one point I owned 20.26%, and he held 35%. Over time I bought back 10% of his shares. If Alex transferred his remaining shares to me now, I would become the majority shareholder, effectively pushing him out. Knowing how quickly his mind could change once the emotional fog lifted, I acted fast. I took out my phone, instructed my secretary to prepare the legal documents, and contacted a notary. The moment I acquired the shares, I sincerely wished Megan and Alex 100 years of happiness. I even escorted them to the entrance of the building, smiling politely. Looking directly at Megan, I warned, "Now that you have the funds, you better not cling to Alex anymore." Then I signaled to the security guard to escort them out. My mother stepped forward, staring at me in disbelief. "What do you mean you're never coming home again?" she demanded. I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked away. Finally, the smugness in her eyes vanished. She tugged at my sleeve, her face filled with panic, realizing that her usual tricks wouldn't work on me anymore. Her voice trembled slightly. I stopped walking and looked at her calmly. "In the future," I said slowly, "you and your family should live well." She didn't understand what I meant at first. But then my father, who hadn't spoken until then, exploded with anger. He rushed toward me, trying to strike me, but the security guards I'd called earlier stood firmly in front of me. For the first time, my father was stunned. He clutched his chest like he might faint from rage, just like my mother had done before. At this point, my nephew finally broke free from Megan's grip and approached me. He looked at me disapprovingly. "Sarah," he said, "you can hate me, but your aunt and uncle are still your biological parents. What you're doing is excessive." I didn't have time to argue, so I lowered my head, picked up my phone, and resumed handling the documents. Alex seemed taken aback by my indifference. Just as he was about to say something else, I raised my head and looked at him seriously. "There's nothing left to discuss between us," I told him. "You can keep the money, but I don't want any further contact." I showed him my phone screen, which already had him blocked across all platforms. Ignoring his displeased reaction, I turned and walked away confidently. As expected, I assumed his former position at the company, coordinated with the other shareholders, and eventually Alex had no choice but to sell his remaining shares. It's true that men can significantly impact their careers after certain turning points. And just like that, while Alex focused entirely on his romantic life, the company began to thrive under my leadership. Meanwhile, Megan maintained a high profile, constantly posting pictures with Alex and my parents on various social platforms, showcasing their picture-perfect family. Naturally, all these expenses were covered by Alex. Since my parents had retired, their lives became increasingly strained. All their savings over the years had gone into supporting Megan's athletic career. Previously, they maintained a facade of prosperity because of me. Now, the entire family was dependent on Alex. Their relatives, who visited regularly, remained unaware and continued praising them for finding such a wealthy son-in-law. Just as they were eager to spread the word and boast about their happy family, I purchased a new house for my aunt. I relocated her from the old neighborhood to a detached house in the city center. My aunt had never married or had children. She treated me like her own daughter. At first, she was reluctant to accept that her name was on the property deed, until I assured her that the house was hers and couldn't be touched by greedy individuals. As I reminisced about our past, I leaned on her shoulder affectionately and said, "I'll live with Aunt from now on. Don't reject me, okay?" Tears welled up in her eyes. She gently patted my back and comforted me softly. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay. As long as Aunt's here, we'll always have a home." Upon hearing that I had bought a house for my aunt, my parents suddenly became anxious. They hurried to the outskirts of the neighborhood where my aunt and I lived. Security was tight here. They couldn't linger at the gate for more than a few minutes without presenting their identification. My father called my aunt's phone and unleashed a barrage of insults. In his mind, my aunt had become a troublemaker who poisoned their father-daughter relationship. She listened calmly and then asked him, "Do you really need me to create discord after what you've done to Sarah?" My father hesitated, but before he could respond, she continued, "You say Sarah is your daughter, but why doesn't your house have her bedroom? Or her wardrobe? There are no dishes or utensils for her. No photo of her in the family portrait. If she's your daughter, where do you place her?" I watched my aunt become emotional over the phone, so I approached and hugged her from behind. I recalled the bitter winter when I lacked proper winter clothing and had to layer my spring and autumn school uniform. I ended up shivering in the snow, but when I returned home, no one was there. My parents had taken Megan out to watch a movie. There was no food left for me in the kitchen, and I had no money in my pockets. Before collapsing, I barely made it to the entrance of my aunt's neighborhood. Her house was 5 long streets away from mine, seemingly the longest distance I had ever walked. If I had fallen anywhere during that snowstorm, I would never have reached safety. Fortunately, I made it. I saw my aunt coming down with an umbrella to take out the trash. I noticed the shock and concern on her face as she rushed over and embraced me, helping me regain sensation from the cold. From then on, I had a home again. My room was at my aunt's house. My dishes and utensils were there. She even bought back the piano that had been sold, placing it quietly in the living room. I had long forgotten how to play, but that day I silently vowed in my heart, as long as I was there, I would be my aunt's greatest support in the future. So now, when my father was being questioned by my aunt on the phone and began spewing foul language in response, I calmly took the phone and said to him, "Don't even think about a new house. Say one more word, and you won't even be able to stay in your current one." He forgot that not only the house but also their living expenses had all been coming from my card. Their massive retirement funds and savings had been depleted over the years, supporting Megan's competitions and training with top instructors. Yet they still looked down on me everywhere. Their voices were cut off on the other end after 2 seconds, and my father exploded with a thunderous roar. "Sarah, you've gone too far. How dare you?" The louder he shouted, the more guilt he felt. I had already faced death once on the operating table, so there was nothing I wouldn't dare now. I calmly expressed my feelings, but my father took these words as me blaming them for their actions. He tried a softer approach, attempting to scold and then sweet-talk me as usual. "In the end," he said, "you're still blaming us for caring too much about your sister. Why don't you think about how pitiful your sister is?" It seemed like he truly believed I was just spoiled and ungrateful. After he finished speaking, I hung up the phone and began contacting a real estate agent. While I was preparing to sell the house, my father and his wife were relentless, trying to track me down and cause trouble wherever I went. I avoided them for 3 days, had someone record sufficient evidence, and then reported them to the police. Shortly after, they were detained for 15 days on charges of provocation and causing disturbances. My parents, who thought they had led a dignified life, never imagined their daughter would send them to the police station in their old age. In front of the officers, they cursed and scolded me, accusing me of being unfilial. Finding it too noisy, I put in earplugs, turned to the police who came to mediate, and firmly refused to reconcile. As they were taken away, my once strict and authoritative father looked at me with a hint of fear in his eyes. He realized that I might truly stop caring about them. He softened his tone toward me, calling my name repeatedly. "Sarah, Sarah, Sarah." It was an intimacy I hadn't received since I was 10 years old. But I had no emotions left, so I didn't soften toward him. Unfortunately, Megan had run off when my parents were taken away. She immediately went on a trip with Alex to protect the reputation of the sports star they had cultivated. My parents insisted that this was all part of their plan, that Megan had no role in instigating anything. I imagined Megan's unpleasant demeanor when not causing harm, figuring there would be another opportunity sooner or later. During this time, I sold the original house at a low price to a man with a tattooed arm who could handle both black and white issues. Before my parents were released, Megan returned from her trip only to find herself locked out of the house. She couldn't believe the house was gone and knocked on the door for a long time, demanding an explanation. When the door finally opened, she saw the tall figure of the tattooed man, and was too scared to move. In the end, Alex drove her to his own home. Within 2 days, my parents were released. Upon hearing that I had sold the house, they began cursing the sky and earth. But no one dared to bother me again. Their survival became their primary concern. So my parents quickly packed their bags and moved into Alex's house overnight. first, Alex welcomed them. But after years of flaunting and asserting themselves to me, they couldn't resist and soon began exhibiting unpleasant traits toward him. Alex, who had never been pushed around since childhood, quickly confronted them. Not long after, my parents moved out of Alex's house. He rented a separate apartment for them, situated half a city away from his own residence. Because of this, my parents constantly blamed Megan. They claimed that when Alex was with me, he never disrespected them like this. Why didn't Megan say anything to Alex? They complained. Megan relied on Alex for her athletic pursuits. How could she stand firm in front of him? Over time, to maintain her relationship with Alex, Megan grew distant from her parents as well. One day, when Megan visited her parents, she overheard them complaining about Alex. It made her nostalgic for the days when she took care of their daily lives. But Megan had grown tired of their manipulative ways. She destroyed everything she could in the house and then confronted her parents, asking why they didn't come to her if they thought she was so exceptional. This was the first time she had ever lost her composure in front of them. After firmly securing Alex, Megan realized that her family was merely a colorful backdrop in her life, and she no longer needed anyone's approval. The confrontation was explosive. My mother was the primary aggressor, wailing and pulling Megan's hair at the rental house entrance, alternately calling her ungrateful and accusing her of not appreciating her years of care. The confrontation between Megan and my mother was explosive. My mother, always the dominant force, started wailing and pulling Megan's hair at the entrance of the rental house. She alternated between calling Megan ungrateful and accusing her of not appreciating all the years of care they had supposedly given her. Megan's father, embarrassed by the scene, sat silently inside smoking. Megan, however, stood her ground, shouting back at my mother and labeling her a vampire and ungrateful herself. The commotion eventually drew the attention of everyone on that floor before abruptly ending. This incident made headlines. Relatives who once flattered my parents now scattered, severing ties with them. One relative even recounted their situation to me, expressing disbelief at how they had once boasted about raising children well and were now describing Megan as ungrateful. As he spoke, he glanced at me, trying to please me by saying, "Sarah, let me say, your aunt really has a good eye for choosing you as her treasure. Now just enjoy it in comfort." My aunt, however, wasn't impressed. She unceremoniously kicked him out. As the door closed behind him, she remained angry, pointing out how they had mocked me as a wild child when I was young, but now that his son was graduating and job hunting, they praised me instead. I felt nothing toward this. I had encountered too many people like them in the first half of my life. But as I watched my aunt's worried expression under the warm yellow light, a fleeting warmth filled my heart. Only then did I realize that a few strands of white hair had appeared among hers. I reached out and held her hand, asking her not to be angry. I invited her to a feast, telling her, "Aunt, what he said was wrong. It's not that you made the right choice by picking me. It's that I'm lucky to have met you." Under the warm glow of the light, my aunt's eyes turned red. She turned away to wipe her eyes before turning back to me with a smile, saying, "Don't be silly. I'm your aunt. It's only natural for me to love you." From that moment on, I worked harder than ever. With my rational and objective perspective, I drove the company's profits to soar, and my own value increased proportionally. When I saw Alex again, it was at a business gala hosted by one of our partners. He was dressed in a meticulously tailored suit, his hair carefully styled. But the weariness on his once proud face was unmistakable. It was clear that life had been tough for him. Supporting his entire family while managing Megan's expensive athletic endeavors had taken its toll. His need for their support meant he had to break up with Megan, since his parents had never approved of her. It was obvious that he truly loved her, so to gain their support, he was willing to lower himself and pander to the small-time bosses he had once looked down upon. But these people, whom he had previously dismissed, now seemed to look down on him instead. The bosses who had once fawned over him lit up when they saw me. They greeted me warmly and approached swiftly. Alex, caught in the middle, could only stand awkwardly in place. Our eyes met, and something in his demeanor changed. His confidence, which had once seemed unshakable, faltered. When he made a move toward me, I simply turned and whispered something to the bodyguard beside me. Moments later, Alex was politely escorted away from the area. It wasn't until the banquet ended that night, and I was getting into my car, that I encountered Alex waiting by the side. I looked at him, recalling our past together. After confirming that everything that had happened was irreversible, without any lingering attachments, I turned and got into my car without hesitation. Alex hurried to stop me, but the car door closed on his hand with a sharp noise as his fingers broke. His face went pale with pain, but his eyes stayed fixed on me. "Do we have to go this far, Sarah?" he asked, his voice hoarse from pain. I lowered the window, handed him a check for $100,000, and offered a light smile. "For your medical expenses," I said gently. Then, without waiting for a response, I accelerated away. Since seeing Alex, I had been on high alert. This group of people was experiencing internal conflicts and were likely eyeing me for their next move. 2 days later, I saw Megan at the entrance of the company. An unexpected sight, considering I hadn't seen her in a long time. If I remembered correctly, she was supposed to be participating in a very important competition at the City Theater. The organizing committee had even sent me an invitation, and Megan's name was on the participant list. But she wasn't wearing her athletic outfit. Instead, she had deliberately applied tired-looking makeup on her face. Clearly, she had come for me. Upon seeing me, Megan immediately adopted a pitiful expression and knelt down without saying a word. "Sarah," she cried. "He is your brother-in-law now. How can you retaliate against him like this, just because of your own relationship issues?" Internally, I knew she was performing in a play. I could see several professional cameras gradually moving closer among the onlookers. Megan had planned all of this. I forcefully pulled her hand and said coldly, "Megan, let's set things straight. It was you who first took your sister's boyfriend. Then you failed to keep him in check, allowing him to harass me. I defended myself against him and even paid his medical expenses. What more do you want?" My voice was loud enough for everyone around to hear. Megan turned pale and looked at me with resentment in her eyes. The whispers among the crowd grew louder. I knew she must have a trick up her sleeve. Sure enough, after Megan cried even more, 2 familiar figures appeared before me. If I were still capable of feeling emotions, I might have laughed out loud at their display. Their relationship seemed so perfect. Despite the embarrassing incident last time, they had reconciled with Megan in the end. Unfortunately, I no longer had feelings, so I intervened before my parents could say anything. I signaled to my secretary to activate the recording equipment. Several cameras were pointed at them. In a calm and slow tone, I said, "From now on, every word you say will be recorded by me as evidence. Evidence and legal consequences will follow afterwards. If any of your statements constitute defamation, I will file a lawsuit and pursue it to the end." Upon hearing this, my father's face turned livid instantly. My mother tried to speak several times, but no words came out. Impatient, I turned and walked away. She finally rushed forward, clinging to my legs, crying and pleading. "What has happened to you? I am your mother. You never treated me like this before," she exclaimed. She recounted the difficulties of raising me over the years, regretting her past actions and begging for forgiveness with tears in her eyes. "Sarah, does it mean you don't want me anymore?" she asked. I looked at her tearful eyes without a hint of emotion stirring within me. I pondered how to respond without causing too much negative impact on the company's image. A strong pair of hands suddenly pulled her away from me. I looked up to see my aunt glaring at my parents and Megan. "Grace," she shouted, "how dare you try to force Sarah into anything? I have evidence of everything you did. Don't push me to expose it all," she continued, pointing at Megan, who was now trembling. "This is my brother's adopted daughter, the woman he abandoned his own daughter for." Realizing the implications, Megan tried to stop my aunt from speaking, but it was too late. My aunt turned back and loudly said to my mother, who was still seated on the ground, My brother never had any deceased war comrades. The girl he adopted is the daughter born out of an affair he had with his ex-lover. This revelation hit my mother like a thunderbolt. Took her a moment to process it. Megan, unable to bear the pressure, turned and fled into the crowd. It was only then that my mother fully grasped the situation. She rushed forward, grabbed Megan, examined her closely, and then, without hesitation, slapped her across the face. Megan cried out in pain. It was a heavy blow. Since she had come to our house at the age of 6, my parents had always cherished and protected her as if she were a precious gem in their hands. She had never been treated like this before. Her usually innocent eyes were filled with tears. Her cries only seemed to provoke my mother even more. She continued grabbing whatever she could find as a weapon, striking Megan repeatedly. Megan dodged and sought help from my father with pleading eyes. The surrounding crowd watched the drama unfold. No one had expected that the family that came to question me would end up quarreling among themselves. The journalist Megan had hired to take pictures had already been escorted out by my private security. As my aunt led me away, the scene escalated further. My father tried to protect Megan and received a slap from my mother, who was then wrestled to the ground by my father in an attempt to stop her from attacking Megan. Security intervened again as the situation spiraled out of control, and they all ended up at the police station once more. This time, I had several paparazzi hired by Megan with prepared stories to tarnish my reputation. Accusations and rumors swirled. Megan couldn't escape in the end. It was Alex, holding hands with someone, rushing over to pick them up from his house. The commotion at the company's entrance had already made it to the local trending topics. Perhaps Alex already knew the whole story on his way. But when he saw a disheveled Megan at the police station, he still wore a look of disbelief on his face. "Megan, aren't you supposed to be at the competition?" he asked. His gaze fell on Megan, realizing that even the clothes under her coat were not the performance outfit she hadn't had time to change into, which made him even more silent. Initially, Alex had loved her for her artistic passion. He supported Megan's dancing as if making up for his past self, who was too afraid to pursue his dreams boldly. He even set aside his own dignity, getting down to the nitty-gritty of life. But now this image was on the brink of collapse. For her to tarnish her own foster sister's reputation just to clear her own name, and to easily give up on a competition that was more important to her than her own life. People are like this sometimes, willing to disregard everything in the heat of the moment, only to backpedal in the next. Seeing the questioning look in Alex's eyes, Megan was clearly panicked. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she hastily began to explain. "Alex, it's not what you think. It was Sarah. She tampered with my performance in the competition, and I had no choice but to do that. I just wanted her to let me go." This was Megan's original plan, to come to my company's entrance, unite with my birth parents, publicly disgrace me, paint me as a jealous and malicious foster sister, and use this as an opportunity to accuse me of manipulation behind the scenes. That way, even if she participated in the competition, she wouldn't get what she deserved. Although she gave up the competition, she could use this scandal to boost her reputation and ensure she didn't lose anything. It was a risky move, but Megan confidently went through with it, relying on the support from my family. She thought she could pin me under public opinion. But little did she know, before Alex walked in, my assistant had already laid out all the details of the matter for him to see, including Megan's transaction records with those paparazzi and their prepared fabrications to frame me. Many things they mentioned hadn't even happened yet, but they confidently claimed they did. Meanwhile, the organizing committee had already issued a statement. They had been organizing the competition for decades and had always maintained a good reputation. Megan not showing up and planning to disgrace them made them furious, especially since some of the higher-ups had connections with Alex's parents. Even if Alex wanted to intervene, they had already learned about Megan's existence. His plan to boost Megan's fame and then bring her back home had fallen apart. I wasn't sure what kind of mindset he had coming to see Megan, but Megan's immediate reaction of lying to him sealed her fate in his eyes. The filter over Megan broke. Alex's look toward her turned icy cold. He didn't even say a word. He just turned around and left, leaving a bewildered Megan watching her last hope slip away bit by bit. Without Alex compensating her losses, Megan received an additional 15 days in detention. During this period, the dance competition committee initiated a lawsuit against her. With Alex's parents' manipulation, the 15 days were forcibly extended to 2 months. My parents were also detained along with them. Having led a splendid life in their later years, they were in and out of prison twice in a year. Their affair during marriage was exposed, and all the praise they had received for adopting Megan was now replaced with ridicule and mockery. Before I left, my father asked me one last time if I really wanted to end up like this. I turned around and answered with utmost sincerity. I looked at my father calmly and told him, "I'm not trying to start trouble. I've been swept along by life for so long, and all I want now is to break free from the undertow that's dragged me down for years. I just want to live my own life well, no longer held hostage by family ties, no longer expecting anything from those who don't deserve it, and no longer sacrificing myself in unfair ways just to earn their approval." I paused for a moment before delivering what I knew would be my final words to them. "I no longer love you," I said softly. "This is the last time I'll address you like this. Farewell, Mom and Dad." My father stared at me, unable to read my expression. Then, without another word, I turned and walked away. From the corner of my eye, I caught sight of my mother with tears streaming down her face. She wanted to say something as she watched me leave, but in the end, nothing came out. Maybe now, she truly regretted it, spending a lifetime pushing her daughter away only to make wedding garments for someone else. But what did that have to do with me anymore? For more than 20 years, I had shed enough tears over them. As I walked out of the police station, my aunt was waiting for me at the door. She was one of the few people in the world who truly understood my father, and she was worried that my actions might embarrass him enough to provoke retaliation. And then there was Megan, who wasn't the type to stay quiet. My aunt's eyes betrayed her unease. I gently placed my hand on hers and told her, "We're not as weak as we used to be. We can withstand whatever comes our way." Only then did my aunt relax a little. After that, I kept an eye on their family's movements. I knew that Alex and Megan had broken up. Megan resisted violently, even causing trouble in front of Alex's parents, which led to harsh consequences. My parents had spent decades investing everything they had into Megan's athletic career. But now, in the blink of an eye, Megan was banned from the national sports community and disappeared completely from public view. With no support left, Megan chose to bow down to my father and cling tightly to my parents once again. But every time my mother saw Megan, she was filled with resentment. She wanted to divorce my father, but he refused. So she vented her frustrations by yelling at and abusing Megan. During this time, my business continued to grow, showing signs of expanding into overseas markets. The same people I once looked up to, the ones who had treated me poorly, now sent me invitations. Even Alex tried to contact me several times, but I didn't respond once. Later, at a dinner party, I met Alex again. He seemed much more mature than before, but his eyes carried a trace of melancholy when he looked at me. "Sarah, you've become so successful now, I almost don't recognize you," he greeted me, his voice uncertain, lacking the confidence he once had. Although he hadn't changed much outwardly, he had lost his former arrogance. He seemed afraid of being rejected by me. Alex quickly started speaking, apologizing to me in person. "I owe you an apology for a long time," he said. "I finally realized that I never really liked Megan. I projected my inner desires onto her, thinking I could find my true self through her. Now I understand how naive I was before. After losing you, I realized what I had truly lost." I listened to his words impatiently, and finally, I couldn't hold back anymore. I stood up to leave. "Alex," I said sharply, "no matter how nicely you phrase it, you can't change the fact that you gave in to temptation and cheated during our relationship. Now you have the audacity to appear in front of me. You really have no shame." Removing the last filter I had on Alex, I realized that the person I once idolized was just like that. Nothing more than a flawed man. Worse, I had already surpassed him long ago. From now on, I would be the one to illuminate my own path. Perhaps feeling too much pressure from me, not long after that, I heard that Alex and Megan had gotten back together again. Indeed, when it came to betrayal, there was either zero or countless instances. But this time, Megan could no longer enjoy the pampering treatment she once received from Alex. He brutally exposed his dark side to her. Alex often physically abused Megan, and worse, constantly belittled her, calling her the most despicable woman in the world. He looked down on her but still sought respect and satisfaction from her during their twisted entanglement. Unexpectedly, my parents reconciled. It was said that my mother was pregnant again, a late child in their lives, which completely dispelled her thoughts of divorce and even led her to accept Megan. On a rainy night with thunder and lightning, an urgent unfamiliar call came through on my phone. When I answered, my father's panicked voice came through. "Sarah, your mother fell at home and there's a lot of blood. We don't know what to do. Please come see her. She raised you for over 20 years. After hanging up, I calmly dialed the emergency hotline for them and arranged for an ambulance. My aunt, who was present, looked at me anxiously, standing up several times to offer to accompany me outside. "No need," I replied calmly. "I'm not a doctor. I won't be of any help there." My aunt looked at me for a while before whispering, "Right, the weather outside is bad. It's dangerous to go out." I listened to my aunt's words, but a hint of doubt crept into my mind. When I finished dealing with work late at night and was preparing to rest, my phone vibrated again. Answering the call, there was a burst of chaotic static noise. Without hesitation, I hung up, only to realize upon exiting the call screen that the number had sent me several text messages. The latest one was just a few lines. "I'm sorry. I'm not worthy to be your mother. Take care of yourself and your Aunt Sarah. I'm going to atone." Scrolling up, I saw 3 words in an earlier message. "Don't come here." My heart jumped at that moment. A long-lost feeling of suspicion rose within me. I stood up from my seat and headed toward the door, but as my gaze caught the pouring rain and thunder outside, my steps gradually slowed. In the end, I took out my phone and dialed the police hotline in my parents' area. The next morning, the first call I received was from the police. They informed me that last night, a fire had broken out in the old neighborhood where my parents lived. Megan, my parents, and Alex had all perished in the flames. After their investigation, they suspected that someone had deliberately set the fire, because the forensic examiners found excessive sleeping pills in all 4 bodies. I couldn't describe the emotions inside me. From the moment I saw that text message last night, to the fleeting emotional roller coaster to now, I remained utterly calm. But it was my aunt who now had teary eyes as she looked at me. She embraced me and gently reassured me, telling me that she would always be there for me, as my family. I lowered my eyes and remained silent. It was only after a long time, when the police investigation results came out, that I learned what had really happened that night. It turned out my mother wasn't actually pregnant. She had wanted to divorce my father, and in embarrassment, my father had tied her up at home. At the same time, Megan wasn't faring well under the manipulation of Alex's parents. She was socially dead at university, banned from the sports community, and stayed at home all day, venting her frustrations on my mother. Of course, she hated me the most. She felt everything happening now was my fault, especially since Alex always seemed distant with her and often used me to belittle her. Megan made up her mind and devised a malicious plan with my father. They wanted to lure me over with my mother's help, then stage an accident to kill me and split my current assets. When my mother found out about it, surprisingly, she offered to help my father. In my father's eyes, my mother was also full of hatred toward me, so he didn't guard against her much. That rainy night, my mother spiked my father and Megan's food with sleeping pills, then called Alex over. Despite looking down on Megan, Alex still respected my mother. When he arrived, he was drugged too. My mother lined them up neatly, then lit the gas stove in the house. Additionally, the police handed me a letter they obtained from my relatives. As I opened it, the paper was stained with tear marks. "Sarah, if we're destined to meet in the next life, I'll make sure to be a good mother for you. For now, I'll seek redemption." I thought, if there really is a next life, it's probably best not to be entangled again. Later, my aunt and I lived well. During the first snowfall, I was making dumplings at my aunt's house, which was decorated in warm colors. As the first snowflake fell, she called me over for dinner. When I turned around, I saw my aunt's kind side profile. The familiar warmth slowly thawed the icy walls around my heart. So I smiled at my aunt, with genuine emotion, for the first time in ages. My aunt, holding a plate, was stunned in place. Slowly, her eyes welled up with tears. We locked eyes and smiled. Finally, after enduring countless trials and tribulations, the road ahead was only filled with blooming spring flowers.